tech enthusiasts and cyber adventurers to the FIFI show.
Welcome back everyone to the FIFI show. I'm your host Shivani, and today we are diving into a very fascinating and crucial topic for fintechs and financial services. So just head to it. Automating marketing compliance. Now, with regulations tightening so much and the demand also growing, how can companies strike a perfect balance between being fast and secure? Now, to help you unpack this and unravel this, we have an incredible guest joining us today, Austin, who is the founder and CEO of Warrant, and she is an expert in marketing compliance automation. Welcome to the show, Austin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Automation has become a bit of a buzzword around, and especially in fintechs and financial services. But when we talk about marketing compliance, why do you think there is such a growing need for automation in this segment?
It's a great question. I think it really goes back to the fact that everything else is being automated with AI. So with that, in marketing comes an explosion of content unlike we've ever seen before. Suddenly, what used to take 2 weeks to write a blog article, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, takes about 5 seconds. So we're seeing more and more marketing content being created. And in the future, we'll also see more and more personalized advertising across all industries, including those that are regulated, like financial services. The existing tooling that financial services and fintechs use to track and document reviews is pretty manual. It's typically email, Slack, Jira, Excel. So as you can tell, an explosion of content does not bode well for these manual tracking systems. So that's why it's become incredibly important for financial institutions and fintechs to implement some kind of tooling to make sure that they can track this content and that it's all documented. That way, if the regulators ever come knocking at your door, you know who approved the content and when and why, without having to do a massive email or Slack discovery, which could take weeks.
No, absolutely. And that makes perfect sense too. And especially when the pressure is to stay both compliant and competitive. Now let's see the stage a little bit more. Can you walk us through some of the key compliance challenges that these financial institutions face? Things like GDPR or FINRA, CCPA. How can they literally affect your marketing efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a lot of the regulators there. What's so interesting about fintech and financial services is that depending on what product your firm markets to the public, you could have very different regulators and very different laws to follow. Mm-hmm. So for instance, you could have one organization that has an insurance arm, which is all, by the way, regulated by the states themselves. So they all have a different marketing rule. And in that same firm, you could have a credit card product, a banking product, a broker-dealer product, investment advisors, and all of these are actually regulated completely separately by different organizations for the most part and with different laws and guidelines that govern them. So that makes it really tricky if you are at a larger firm to understand what is this marketing material, what's the audience, what's the product, and to your point, to get around that, a lot of firms in the past, if you recall from maybe our childhood, they would sponsor litter leagues, they would do golf charity events, things they would say this credit union cares. And that worked back then because we chose our banks and our financial institutions based on proximity, based on trust. But nowadays, in the world of, what was it, AMC to the moon and things like that, we're instead choosing our financial institutions, what we're investing in based on social media, based on advertisements on Facebook, and based on the products themselves. Where can we get the most interest for our savings account? I no longer care if my credit union down the street is down the street. I care more about digital banking, about getting higher interest for my money. So we're seeing this shift now that has never really happened before from traditional institutions no longer being able to rely on this overarching brand, which isn't as regulated. You can say Chase Bank cares all you want, to more of this product-specific advertising, like we offer this percentage on our savings account, this credit card gives you this much back. Like that's all new, and that's where we get into regulated hot water, as I say. Because basically what the regulators are looking at, they're trying, even though they may seem frustrating, they are trying to protect consumers like you and me from being misled with marketing. That's really what the crux is of all of the regulations. So if you run afoul of that, if you lie, usually they don't lie, but sometimes people do lie. If you lie, if you misrepresent what your product is, that's really where the regulators will step in, and the fines can be very significant. I think the biggest fine from FINRA was like $170 million for Robinhood a couple years ago. So like the fines can be significant. And if you're a smaller fintech or financial institution, obviously a fine that's significant, that's the average last quarter was 3.5 million as a fine. Like those can really affect your business. And if you're a fintech with an underlying financial infrastructure partner, which most of them are, so partners that actually have the bank accounts and the banking license, partners that actually issue the credit cards, if you get sanctioned, they're the ones that get sanctioned, and they don't care about your fintech more than they care about their own business. So it could actually shut down many fintechs, and that's kind of the shift we're seeing in the market today.
Right. So it's like even the brand value is also at stake over here. I'm also from compliance background, and we also work with a lot of regulations like ISOs, and we work with insurance companies working on threat intelligence, making sure they're compliant. And in Middle East specifically, I have come across a standard where they tell you how your social media should be regulated. So all their marketing, like if you are promoting cybersecurity, if you're promoting your insurance companies, you're promoting your policies, how you should be presenting yourself. So they have like whole standard for that, and they have to be compliant through it. Otherwise, they also face penalties, like similar to GDPR and FINRA. So just imagine, like these are some of the big challenges that like every company has to face for sure. And even the risk of non-compliance, like there's no joke, right, about it. Who is going to pay like fine in millions? So we are talking fines, reputation at stake, loss of customer trust, because it really affects your brand value and customer loses that trust in you. And with all that, like, could you shed some light on, what's at stake for the companies like that fails to comply?
Yeah, I think you already kind of went over it, but like you said, the fines, loss of business, loss of customers. And the fact of the matter is even before FINRA, the SEC, or whatever regulatory body gives that fine, before that, you are heads down trying to respond to these regulator requests. So instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing in marketing or compliance, instead of doing that, you're kind of taken away from the business and really focused on where can we find this documentation? How can we respond to this request? It's kind of an all hands on deck scenario. So that really disrupts business as well, because for a couple months, these things can take months. Some of them can even take years. You have people that are not focused on growing your business at all, but are instead responding to the regulators because of a previous mistake that a lot of times they weren't even there for.
Absolutely. So like, now when we come to automation and all these things, like what significant role automation plays, in addressing these challenges, because it will enhance both compliance and security for you. So what does actually automation do in addressing these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So for FINRA, for the SEC, and for a lot of the regulatory bodies in the US, they require a certain standard of care of each marketing asset. So you're required to get each marketing asset that goes out to the public. The public in this case means a retail communication that is up to 25 people. Anything more than 25 people is considered a public communication with the public. And with that, it requires a registered agent. So that's an agent that's registered with the SEC, with FINRA, to review that documentation and to sign off on it, that they've reviewed it, they think it's fine. So it's basically putting as a compliance officer, it's putting yourself on the line, and they are individually liable. So if there is a sanction, a lot of times those people that said this is fine are the ones that are cited in the sanction and could lose their licenses and obviously their way of work since they're a compliance officer. So they sign off on it, and then you also need to document that. You need to document the sign off, you need to document what was the original version and what was the final version of the product that went out to the public. And then you also need to supervise. So that becomes super important when, as you were talking about social media a little bit earlier, it becomes super important to monitor that communication, and see, and this is real, guys. Banks have to take every single complaint that you put on a social media post, and they need to submit it to the regulatory body for the most part. So if you want to complain about your bank and you want them to make sure they see it, you can comment on their social media, because supervision is another part of this. That also goes for if the communication wasn't continued by the bank, if it was on a radio station, if it was an influencer posted it, they still need to supervise it. So that's where automation tooling becomes super important, because otherwise everything I just said has to be record kept by some guy named Joe. He's putting in Excel, he's putting it in Google Drive, he's adding the link to the Excel, he's saying I approved it on this date, and then he needs to manually keep checking up on this social media post or blog post or whatever to see the comments. That's incredibly time consuming. It's going to take up literally 100% of Joe's time, depending on how many materials that organization is putting out per month. So where automation comes in is you can really streamline this whole process. So that's a little bit about what we've built at Warrant. So at Warrant, you upload a material, and then we automatically check it against the firm's policies that could include regulatory guidance like the SEC or FINRA, things like we just talked about, no absolutes, no misleading language, and taking into account that audience. And then it gives you basically a report card of what you might want to change before it goes into that legal and compliance review. And then our product also takes you through that legal and compliance review process. So you approve it within the platform, and it's all documented. No Excel, no Jira, no weird Google Cloud links. And then it goes into a content library. So if a regulator ever does come after you, which hopefully will never happen with our tool, but happens sometimes, you can actually just download everything that's within their criteria for that request. So it used to take 4 weeks, can take 5 minutes, depending on how many materials you have. So just basically eliminating, that's what I love about automation, is it's basically eliminating a lot of the manual tasks that were incredibly frustrating to everyone involved. And making it just a lot faster and more efficient so that these marketers, these in-house counsel, these compliance officers can focus on things that are actually moving the business forward. And instead of, who tracked that Excel?
I know. That's the most, the hardest part, because you have to keep track of so many things. And I also see how Warrant is making this workflow very smooth, and how the approval process is also getting simplified. And it's amazing how much faster things can move with that automation in place. So can you share any real life example or case studies that you may have? How have these workflows helped companies to reduce the review time? Do you have any examples on that front?
So we are getting ready to launch. So not yet, but check back in a month or so and we should have some real life examples. But I think like when you're designing a compliance program, as I'm sure you're well familiar with, whether it's marketing compliance, whether it's security compliance,
right?
It all starts with the employees themselves. Like if the employees don't know or have any idea what the regulations are, what they should be striving to do, it's almost impossible for anyone to have a great compliance program, even if you have all of the tooling in the world. So one thing that we're really trying to do at Warrant is embedding training, like micro training, into our product itself. That way, everyone that uses it can continue to get up-leveled and have a greater understanding of what the restrictions are, what they can say, what they can't say. So that way, over time, marketing materials will become more and more compliant with the tool, but also outside of the tool. Even if the tool didn't exist, these people will have a greater understanding. And I think that's so important to compliance in general. Is I don't think people purposely go outside of compliance. So really trying to make it more clear what the regulations are and how we can, as we always like to say, paint within the lines.
Yeah. No one wants to be at the pointy edge of the sword themselves, So it's like they want to be compliant, but they just need to figure out how they have to be. So
yeah. And there's not a lot of resources in marketing compliance, like to learn. Like when I first started in financial services, I was like, what? Wait, I was like, where can I find a book? And they're like,
yes. So there can be like a lot of use cases when we think about, and you aptly said that right. There is very less resources in, marketing compliance. Even I have been working in compliance since 5+ years. I have not seen marketing automation compliance, because we have seen people doing it manually, but I have not seen anywhere where, an automation is in place. And, we also talked about how it can speed up things, tracking through Excel, and then, automation can just do the thing in just 5 minutes. Now let's talk about speed. So how does automation help speed up the time to market, without sacrificing on the security? What's the secret sauce behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So today, what happens is you have your designers, possibly your outside designers, you have your copywriters, you have your entire creative team working on, say, a billboard. And then you've made this billboard, it's beautiful, and then you submit it to legal and compliance, possibly via email, and then you wait. Yeah. So obviously we can't keep all of our designers, all of our copywriters waiting for us to get feedback back. So they go and they work on another project. 2 days, let's say 2 days, but sometimes it could be much longer. Compliance and legal comes back. They have a couple changes that they want to see implemented. Some of them are really low-hanging fruit, like we used the wrong disclaimer, or we used a $sign, which, by the way, FINRA really hates when you use money as imagery. These are the kind of regulations that we deal with. So I'm like, okay, great. I have this feedback. Now I go back to my designers and my copywriters, but because they've already moved on to another project, I have to once again be like, come back, please help me. You need to get those resources back. So now we have 2 to 3 more days. So at this point, it's been 5 days since the project was ready to ship. So now I get that feedback back. I go back to legal and compliance. 2 more days eclipse. And then they say, oh, this is fine. We just have one more thing. Back to design, back to copy for that edit. Right. So now we're 14. The average to get a marketing asset reviewed in most financial institutions is about 17 days. Now, let's say that there's a huge issue, last year with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. I was at Brex at the time. We needed to get an asset out in an hour to show our FDIC insurance, because that was, what was happening in the zeitgeist at that moment. to do that, we needed to have everyone on a call working together, including legal and compliance, to give us real-time feedback in order to get that asset out the door. So that's kind of what we've done with Warrant, and some of the other compliance tooling on the market that has entered in the last couple of years has also done, is with that instant review, we're able to get like these low-hanging fruit feedback, things like the $ is a no, or you're using the wrong disclaimer. We're able to pull that way forward in the process. You could even use that while you're still developing the asset. That way, by the time it gets to legal and compliance, you're hoping that they're just focused on like the overall strategy. Is this an offer that we want to make? Is this how we want to market our product? Versus like, okay, you're using the wrong language, you're using the wrong disclaimer, things that, you know, can easily be caught when you're developing the asset versus in that final stage of review. So that's how it makes it a lot faster. With Warrant, we have an estimate that what usually takes 17 days will probably go down to around that 2 to 3 day window, which is extraordinary, because then you don't need to stay up late with an hour doing real-time reviews. Instead, you can get it out the door a lot faster.
You know, I have also seen that personally. Marketing people are not very tech savvy, and they also face some kind of problems when you have to make things compliant, and you know, that lingo or jargons that most of the compliance and security teams use, marketing people might not have a very fair understanding of that. Even I face it in my company too, because marketing have a different mindset. They do not understand the tech factor, and I imagine, like, you know, it has to be a collaboration between both the teams. How do you think that happens? Is there like a quarrel that happens like every time, you know, because you have to get faster approvals, you have to be compliant, and you know, with everything, how does the collaboration between both the teams happen, and still maintaining the quality of the work that we have to put out?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be tension between marketing, compliance, and legal.
Right.
And I think that comes from the fact that marketers are used to asking for forgiveness and compliance officers are used to asking for permission.
Yes.
So I think, but using tooling and investing in training on both sides of, you know, what are these job families? What do they care the most about? I think can go a long way. I like to always say with Warrant, like, my mission is to really get marketing, compliance, and legal all to be BFFs with friendship bracelets. Because right now, because there isn't tooling, it's really compliance and legal that are telling the marketers no, but it shouldn't be like that. Instead, it should be like, let's all be educated on the regulations. And similar to like security compliance, it's up to everyone. It's up to compliance is up to everyone. We have to be compliant to be able to continue to exist as a business, and it's in all of our best interests. We don't want to mislead our customers. We want them to know what they're getting and be happy with our products. So I think we're starting to see that shift, and I hope it will become more of a shift that, in addition to security compliance being everyone's responsibility, marketing compliance will also be everyone's responsibility at the organization.
Aptly said, because customers have to be like the prime important factor in this, and they need to be satisfied. And it also resonates with me too, because we have testers and developers, and they never gel with each other, because developer will develop something and my testing team would be like, have you developed it keeping the security in mind? Because this is not secure. And then secure coding, the QA, then all the teams will be like, you know, I have done my best, it's up to you. And collaboration is really, really very important, and everyone has to be on the same page with that unified vision. And it's like, you know, it sounds like we have to streamline everything, and especially in teams where time is essence, and we cannot lose that. Now, like, I want to talk more about like security concerns. Like, automated workflows are great, and you know, but what about securing the data within those systems? Like, we need to be making sure that whatever data companies are putting in, they are secure. So what are the best practices, that keep sensitive data safe in these automation tools?
Yeah, I think the short answer is that for marketing communications and compliance tools,
Right.
it's a little less of an issue, just in the sense of these materials are intended to go live to the public and can therefore be pulled in to any large language model within a couple minutes of being published. So I think the security isn't as big of a concern as it would be if you're using customer data. The second that you add customer data to any of these types of workflow tools in financial services is the second that security becomes an almost overwhelming task. Your data, as I'm sure everyone will be happy to hear, is extremely protected in financial services.
Yes. They can't afford to let go of that.
Yes. So most people that work in a financial institution will not have access to any of your personal data. If they do, it's usually a string of numbers. So from a security standpoint for us, we just make sure that our web app is as secure as possible. And we do talk each of our clients through, what the AI is that we're using, how it uses our data. And we do very strongly advocate that they do not put any customer data into the platform, and that it should be used solely for retail communications. So communications that are intended to be publicly facing.
Right. So we all know about these role-based access systems, only need to know bases or people who are authorized should be able to access. And it is critical as well because every financial and banking institution will have certain processes in place. And what about cyber threats on this? Can automation really help reduce the exposure to the risks phishing, malware? It does, because we also work in the same domain. Sometimes you can detect early. But what are your thoughts on these parts?
I think it can reduce phishing a little bit, just in the sense of you have an IT professional, for instance, can go in and really ensure that email doesn't match anything that was approved through the marketing compliance tool. So it is interesting because it is one of the only, if the only, full source of truth of what you put out there from a marketing standpoint. So in that way, it can help. But in terms of other risks, I'm not sure it would be that effective.
Okay. So what are some of the common challenges that companies face while trying to integrate these automated compliance solutions? Can you shed some light on those?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges here is that there are multiple stakeholders that are using this tool. So most workflow tools like Trello, Jira, Monday, they're typically only leveraged by a single team in an organization. So for instance, Monday might be used by the marketing team. Jira, most famously, is used by engineering teams. So when you're trying to implement a workflow tool that will be leveraged by marketing, legal, compliance, you have to get a lot of different people on board and make sure they're comfortable with both the underlying infrastructure, the security, and with actually leveraging and using the tool. So with that, it does take a little bit longer to implement a tool like this. But the good news is that with compliance, what you want to do is you want to think about compliance from a timeline perspective. So instead of spending a ton of hours adding in all of your existing marketing material and saying when it was approved, instead you're like, we're starting from today. Everything from this day forward is on this tool. That makes it a lot easier because regulatory requests are all in a dated fashion, from this month to this month, from this year to this year. So from that standpoint, we can onboard people a lot faster than any kind of tooling that is taking in previous materials. So that's a great thing. And then in terms of implementation, what we do is we create custom policies for the company based on, what their policies are that exist, and then also by watching them review marketing material to see what they look for. That way we can make sure to train our system so that it will be very similar, catching what they would have been looking for anyway.
No, absolutely. And Warrant is also one such tool that is trying to automate compliance, and it's there out there. People can always see that. But you being the founder, and I wanted to have your expertise. What should a customer look at when they are trying to select a tool? Any advice on selecting the right tool for you so that it can meet both the requirements?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of tools out there, and I think you'll always be able to find the best one for your organization. What I would look for is ease of use. Compliance is hard enough. You don't need to learn how to use a tool.
Absolutely.
It should work out of the box. Otherwise, what are we doing?
True. We don't want to overburden ourselves with more stuff other than what we already have in hand.
Exactly. So ease of use is huge. Reporting is huge. So we're adding an AI chatbot to our reporting. That way you could easily copy and paste the regulator's request into it, and it will generate a report. A lot of them it's very difficult to pull a report. And since a huge piece of your marketing compliance tooling is documentation, it should not be hard to pull a report. That's the entire point of the product.
Amazing. Yeah. Because now people are moving towards AI, and people want to be how can AI fix things for me, or maybe make my existing workflow better. I still remember when ChatGPT came in, everyone was people were pro, and they were we should use it or we shouldn't use it. I'm if it is making your work easier, then why not? So if AI is there and give you your time back, makes work easy, and you can focus on things that are important to you, I think that's it. We have achieved that level of freedom at that point in time. And automating these compliances with AI-driven compliance tools, I think that's game changer. One couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are scared of AI taking their jobs, but this is one area where a registered agent, a real human in the loop, as they like to say, does need to happen and is required by the regulators to make sure that consumers are protected. This is just making their job a lot easier instead of creating new drives and Excel docs. They can just hit approve.
Absolutely. It's refining your work more, and it's making you put your brain into more concrete work that you should be focusing on, running your business, taking strategic decisions, or maybe taking some breaks so that you can focus and regain your focus on what work you want to do. And with AI, automation is at another level. And what can companies do to prepare themselves more about these automated future? How can they continuously refine their processes to stay ahead? So that is also one important part. So do you want to shed some light on that?
Yeah, I think some of the financial institutions have already implemented AI task force or departments to really evaluate new technology and see how it can work in the bank or in the financial institution. I think any place where people are still doing a ton of manual work, KYC, anti-money laundering, marketing compliance, these are prime areas where, all of them compliance areas, where companies can really start to invest and get immediate impact from AI. And I think as we move forward, we'll find other areas where it can be leveraged. In marketing, as I said, it's already being leveraged at most top financial institutions to create graphics and images for ads and even some social media and blog content. So we will start seeing it more and more. But marketing's not going away. It's just becoming more hyper-personalized.
No, absolutely. And with that, we have so many AI compliances, AI regulations also coming into place. Even we as security testers, we see, pen testing on AI applications, and then, AI compliance, like checking for compliances in AI applications, how they should be as a standard, like it has been launched. So I think we have to live with it, and I think that's the way forward. And we need to make sure that we are responsible for the right use of AI. So I think that's the point we should be focusing at.
Yeah, and absolutely. I always think, like, when I wanted to create, an AI tool, it was really important to me to make sure that this tool wouldn't ruin jobs or take away jobs or like be used in an unethical way. And I think if everyone applies that same vigor, like, we do have a productive future. But yeah, we should really be focusing on that.
Absolutely. Even I believe AI cannot replace a human, and it will not take away your job. It will be like it's aiding you to do your work more efficiently. Like with ChatGPT, you see positions for prompt engineering coming up. Like, you need a person who can write prompts in ChatGPT in order to give you excellent results. So just imagine, there are avenues in it. You just need to see the brighter side of it. Anything that comes in new, people are skeptical, and there's always a good side and a bad side. I think it's about focus, where we have to put our focus. So I think that's it. So such valuable advice, Austin, and I really wish like Warrant goes way further and people start adopting them in their lives, making their lives easier in automating their compliances and marketing efforts. I think it's a great tool. I haven't used it personally, but I will definitely give it a try. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your expertise with us. I think automation is clearly going to play a huge role in helping companies balance that compliance, the speed, and security in their marketing efforts. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you. It was a blast.
And to our listeners, thank you so much. And tune in to another episode of the FIFI Show. Be sure to subscribe our channel and catch the future episodes. Until next time, stay safe, stay ahead. Bye-bye.